let's get to my special guest. So Amy, I mentioned a little bit why we brought you on here today, but why don't you give us a little bit a background about you and where you're coming from?
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, Chad, I really appreciate you asking me to be here. I'm very happy to be with you all today. I have been in nutrition for over 37 years. So it's, I've been around for a long time, I guess. And my original training was as a dietitian nutritionist. And that was a long time ago, but a little over 20 years ago, I would say, I became very interested in root cause, with regard to getting to the root of disease and imbalances. So I began to study functional nutrition, and I became a certified clinical nutritionist and an integrative and functional nutrition practitioner. Now what I do is I have the privilege of overseeing an amazing team of nutrition practitioners in Epigenetics. So Epigenetics is the name of the company who I oversee. Again, a team of nutritionists. We provide nutrition therapy for people all over the country. We have been around for about 12 years. Now, why I'm really here today is because we are the sister company to Cell Science Systems. And Cell Science Systems is the laboratory which conducts functional nutrition testing, including one of the tests that we're going to be focusing on today. And my team and I are very, very much involved in educating practitioners and patients who utilize the Cell Science Systems testing.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And again, I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for coming on and helping explain this very important, exciting topic. And I really love you mentioned about getting to the root cause, right? I mean, I know so many people who are listening right now, they've been probably fed a bunch of pills and given a diagnosis and just told that's all it is. There's nothing you can do. And it's just that we get caught in this trap of treating symptoms, and not getting to the root cause. And we don't treat the symptoms, and we don't get to the root cause. We just treat symptoms. Things get worse and worse and worse. And we want to prevent that. We want to get people back on the path to being in harmony with their bodies. So
absolutely.
Here's the agenda for today. So we're going to talk about why diets, quote unquote, diets don't work. And we're going to talk about 3 foods all genes tell you to avoid. Doesn't matter who you are, what your genetic test will tell you. These are things that no matter who you are, you should be avoiding. We're going to talk about number 3, what your genes tell you about your nutrition. This is where it gets into individualization. At the end, again, we'll have a live Q&A with myself and Amy at the end. But again, you can ask questions as you go. Krista and Rachel are also here to help. So let's get started with why diets don't work. Does anybody ever feel like this lady right here, like just screaming her head, like help? Actually, look at all these different things that people can end up doing, like Atkins, detox, acupuncture, low carb, weight loss, food combining, like fat-free, vegan, like so many things, right? Like put in the chat if you've tried any of these things or any other things and you just kind of feel helpless. Like what are the things that you've tried? So if you tried every diet under the sun and still feel overweight, you feel sick, you feel unhappy, this could be the simple reason why, is that you're eating specific foods that disrupt your genes and block you from reaching your health goals. And there's no one size fits all solution for nutrition or health. Every body is unique with its own history needs, its own health risk and DNA. And it's one of the reasons why men and women, they may lose weight on their first try, but while others plateau on the same diet. You ever have that? Like a friend tried this diet and they did great. And then I tried it and horrible, like things actually got worse. That happens a lot. And there's a reason why. And we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit. So let's first get started with bioindividuality. And this is where your genetic nutrition comes in to help you discover your bioindividuality. And genetic nutrition testing, it isn't the type of genetic test that identifies like your ancestry or your family history, but instead it determines which foods and supplements you should consider for optimal health. And there are around 20,000 genes in the human body. And many of the genetic nutrition tests will look at 5 genetic variants that you may have. And the 5 most important gene variants for nutrition. And this is a great place to start if you want to discover what your genes can tell you about your nutrition. So this is a deep rabbit hole. Again, there's 20,000 genes out there, but if you're going to go down this rabbit hole, this is the place to start with these 5 genes and looking at if we have variants or not. So Now we get into some of these big words. And this is why I'm bringing Amy on here to kind of talk about first, what is methylation? You know, it sounds like a big word, but Amy, if you could tell us just in a simple way, like what is methylation? What does it mean to turn genes on and off? What's this dimmer switch thing we keep hearing about? Maybe dive into that for us.
Sure. Well, methylation is a biochemical pathway that takes place in every single human cell, and it's happening all the time. It's happening right now for all of us, and it takes place about 1 billion times per second, actually. And we're going to look at some test results. So I'll show you what this biochemical pathway looks like, and we've actually made it pretty simple. But in simple terms, what methylation is the donation of a methyl group from one molecule to the next. Now I'll explain that a little further. Everybody knows what H2O is, right? H2O, water, very, very basic compound, but we can't live without it. It's kind of the same thing with a methyl group. You know, think back to science class years ago. What a methyl group is, a very basic compound. It's a 1 carbon atom attached to 3 hydrogen atoms, so it's CH3. But it's basic, but it serves such crucial functions within this methylation pathway, and then this methylation goes on to impact so many roles that our cells, the functions of our cells. So now I can explain this later too, Chad, when we look at the test results, but I want to make sure that people understand too that there are 2 types of methylation. There's metabolic methylation and there's DNA methylation. Now, metabolic methylation has to do with the forming of different proteins and the breaking down of different proteins. And what the methylation process is responsible for forming are your immune cells, coenzyme Q10, your neurotransmitters, so your brain chemicals, they're responsible for forming those, and also breaking down metabolizing those. But then they're responsible for breaking down certain other proteins like estrogen, so hormone clearance, histamine, toxins that's involved in stress hormones. So it's doing so many things. So just from that perspective, you can imagine how far-reaching methylation that we'll look at in the genes in this pathway, how far-reaching this is, how it can impact every organ system in the body. And then when you ask about turning genes on and turning genes off, that's where the DNA, the second type of methylation, comes in, and that's DNA methylation. So what happens is, you know, all of our genes contain information, and that's instructions for our bodies. Well, you know, our genes really don't do a heck of a lot until they are activated. And that's what methylation does. A methyl group kind of sits on our DNA, activates it, and that is the result. What results is turning the genes on or turning the genes off. So it's a matter of the methylation having an impact on how much and where cells are able to make their proteins. There's special function of their cells, those cells. So that's what, you know, turning a gene on and turning a gene off, a gene expression. So what we do in our lifestyle and our methylation, how we are methylating, and we'll find out more about that today, that impacts how your other genes end up being expressed.
Got it. And so with regards to some genes being on and some genes being off, is it better for us to have all our genes on?
Well, what happens is in any given cell, it turns out that most of the genes are turned off, and there's only a fraction of them that are turned on. But and this is happening all the time. And I don't want to confuse the issue either. But there's also demethylation, which is the removing of a methyl group. So methylation is adding the CH3, and demethylation is removing it. And that is happening all the time. And that's turning genes on and turning them off. But for example, the genes that we would want to have turned on, for example, would be the tumor suppressor genes. Those genes that are helping to reduce the risk of cancer. We don't want them turned off.
Right.
And then there are genes that actually tend to decrease bone density. Well, we want them turned off, right? So really, turning things on and turning them off, what we're really aiming for is balanced methylation. Providing our bodies the materials that it needs to methylate properly, which then goes on to help our genes be expressed appropriately.
Got it. Okay, so that means that I like the word balance. We want balanced methylation, and when things are imbalanced, I'm assuming that's when a lot of symptoms can come in. So what type of health issues or symptoms might someone experience if they have imbalanced methylation?
Well, I would say it could be anything, but most commonly things like migraines, anxiety, panic, sleep difficulties, depression, attention issues, cardiovascular risk. Some people know what their homocysteine level is. Elevated homocysteine can increase the risk of a number of health problems, and including, the most common ones people know about would be cardiovascular issues, risk of stroke. Those are the big ones, but autoimmunity, poor gut health, high histamine levels, high hormone like estrogen dominance, really the list goes on and on and on.
That's great. And I'm already thinking about all the symptoms that come with all those things, and how many times people are chasing those symptoms, but they're not even looking at the genetic issue and
Right.
what's really at the root cause. So very, very cool. So the dimmer switch in your genes kind of keeps things at the nice level in your body in order for you to be as optimally healthy as possible.
And I think this is one more thing, Chad. I'm sorry to interrupt, but another good metaphor. One of the methylation gurus I kind of tap into from time to time. I like the way she put it is, our DNA is like a computer, and our computer, really the computer doesn't do a whole heck of a lot unless it's got software on it, right? We got to, it's just there. Well, it's the same thing with our DNA. Our DNA is really not doing much of anything. It's kind of inert unless it's activated. And that's what methylation does.
Got it. Well, thank you for breaking that down. So just kind of summarize the processes that methylation plays a role in. So we have energy production, turning genes on and off, what you mentioned, and we want balance within that, and really ideal for us. Detoxification, brain chemistry, hormone clearance, fat metabolism, and eye health. So that's a wide range of health issues associated with those processes of methylation. So let's get into another big word, epigenetics. That's another one I hear a lot of. I know a lot of people listening are probably hearing a lot about that. But basically, what is it? What is epigenetics? We have here the conductor for your cells. What does all that mean?
Yeah, this is great. So epi actually means on top of. So epi would be on top of, and genetics on top of our genes. So really, it's what is sitting on top of our genes determines how those genes are used. Kind of like when what's turned on, what's turned off. So in epigenetics, well, first of all, methylation, the pathway that we're going to look at today, is considered an epigenetic process. So again, this is why it's what you had said from the beginning. These 5 key genes in the methylation pathway is what you start with, because that's going to go on. If we're doing the right thing to support methylation, that's going to go on to help our other genes. It's an epigenetic process. It's how our genes interact with our choices, but methylation is one. And then our lifestyle, what we eat, our stress management, our gut health, what we expose ourselves to, how we manage stress, the amount of sleep that we get, obviously nutrition status. So all of this it sits on our genes and impacts how the genes are expressed. We cannot change our genetic code, what we're born with, what our parents gave us. We can't change that, but we can change how those genes are expressed.
Got it. So yeah, one of the things I always notice especially when I drive in Houston, I see these signs on there that says like, does heart disease run in your family, right? And I've always looked at that in an interesting way, right? Because I think back with like Weston Price, looking at indigenous cultures. And if we go back far enough, like heart disease actually is not present in our family. It's only when our family started to be affected by the environmental toxins, by our lifestyle, the way we're eating, the way we're moving, and like a lot has changed. Yeah. So our genetic expression really has a lot to do with the heart disease that might be quote unquote running in our family, but it's just it's not just it's not a lot in life, right? We want to become a victim to that. We want to really expose what's going on.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Agree 100%. And another one of my genetic gurus I wanted to kind of share, because I think this helps me to understand as well. Another metaphor is our DNA is the floor plan, but our daily decisions build the house.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, the metaphors are super helpful. I mean, definitely for me, but I know for a lot of people, because these are interesting sciencey words that are new, so very helpful. So let's talk about a food first approach. And here at NativePath, I'm always talking about like, no, you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet and poor lifestyle. It really is a food first approach. So I'm always going to be hampering on this stuff, but just know that everything you put into your body has a direct impact on your genes. And if you're not giving your genes the unique nutrients that they need to function correctly, the entire system malfunctions. And I want to point out unique nutrients. You want to point out the things that you need the most in order to function. So let's go back to 3 foods all genes tell you to avoid. Again, I mentioned Weston Price and how he found these key foods that were present in the modern people, but were not present in indigenous people, and direct correlation. So it doesn't matter what a genetic test tells you, these are the things that you should be avoiding. So number 1, refined grains. So are generally considered to be bad for your health because they have been stripped of many of their beneficial nutrients, including dietary fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Refined grains also break down more quickly than whole grains, leading to spikes in blood sugar and an increased risk for developing diabetes and heart disease. Additionally, refined grains are often higher in calories than their unrefined counterparts, which can lead to weight gain, not to mention all the problems it can cause to your gut. So refined grains and fortified grains, not something that our native ancestors were eating on a regular basis, and it caused a whole lot of health issues once even our government started recommending grains as the base of the food pyramid. It became a really big problem and started subsidizing wheat. Number 2 here.
I'm so sorry, Ted. Can I add something
yes.
to that? Because I don't want to forget to mention this later when we talk about folic acid, but we mentioned fortified grains. So the food fortification program, like what I think it happened in our country like 20 years ago, I think it was, the whole goal of that was to reduce the risk of birth defects. So they added folic acid. Now, yeah, it did work overall to reduce the risk of birth defects, but it's interesting, what they fortified, or unfortunately what people were eating like this stuff. It's just like, it's so sad when you think about it. But even more, what I really want to bring out with this is folic acid is very often what is used in, to be what they're fortifying with. So not only these refined grains, but other packaged and processed foods. And some people can handle the folic acid, but there are others that shouldn't take any folic acid. So this is going to be very important when we look at the genetic test results, because folic acid needs to be avoided for certain people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll take a look at that later. I'm excited about the test results we're going to look at. Number 2, trans fats and industrial seed oils are bad for seniors because they develop high levels of unhealthy fats that can raise cholesterol levels and increase the risk of heart disease. Additionally, these oils are highly processed, which means they contain unnatural chemicals that can have a negative effect on your health. And furthermore, trans fats and industrial seed oils can be inflammatory, which can lead to chronic health issues such as arthritis and autoimmune diseases. So again, going back to Weston Price, he never found these type of fats with indigenous people, right? These are things that came with the modern world. And what's really sad to me, there's a long time in our country, in America, where trans fats were labeled as the healthy substitute for butter. And people went crazy over this stuff, and heart disease peaked in the 50s and 60s. So please make sure you're not using any trans fats. But what a lot of people I think are still using, thinking that they're good for them, are these industrial seed oils, things like vegetable oil, safflower oil. When I was a home health physical therapist, I would go to people's homes and treat them. And a lot of these people had heart health issues. And I would look on their counter and I would see that they were using things like vegetable oil, safflower oil, canola oil, and the labels on these foods would say heart healthy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's really misleading, and it got me really frustrated with the path that people were being led down. So we really want to make sure that anyone watching this, please go to your pantry after this. If you have any of those industrial seed oils, throw them out. Get some really good fats like, coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, butter. Those are much better things to have in your house than these trans fats and industrial seed oils. So third one I have here is high mercury fish. So a lot has changed in our ocean waters in the past 50 years in a major way. But just know that fish that contain high levels of mercury, that includes shark, ray, swordfish, barramundi, gemfish, orange roughy, ling, and southern bluefin tuna. But high mercury fish are bad for you because it contains high levels of mercury. That's a toxic metal that can cause damage to your brain, to your nervous system, and eating large amounts of mercury contaminated fish can lead to memory loss, vision problems, and a weakened immune system. So we're really about the quality of any protein you put in, and the even the fish oil, the regular fish oil that people are using that you might get from like CVS or Eckerd's typically comes from really polluted waters, and not something we suggest. If you're going to take fish oil, try krill oil from the pristine waters of the Antarctic Ocean. So other things that we want people to avoid, right, that you should not be eating, right, that are very common in the modern world: excess and added sugars, right? Huge problem with your blood sugar, can lead to hyperinsulinemia, can set you up for a whole host of diseases. Also, conventionally raised animal products. This isn't a deal breaker, but whenever you can, if you're eating meat or chicken or fish, again, always make sure that you're trying to get the best quality product that you can. You're not just what you eat, you are what you eat. So if you're eating an animal that was fed grains and given antibiotics and hormones, although those toxins are going to be stored in the fat of that animal. It's going to be high in omega-6 fats. It's going to be very inflammatory for you. You want to get the highest quality you can. Try to get grass-fed, pasture-raised. That's what our collagen is, for instance. Avoid fried foods. If you're going out to a restaurant and they're frying the food, just know that they're using those industrial seed oils. Very inflammatory, not good for you. I'm also not a big fan of plastic food or beverage containers. When stuff gets shipped across the country and it's heated, a lot of the BPA and the toxins from those things can leach into your food, into your beverages. Not good for you. And I'm also not a big fan of excessive alcohol consumption. It really wrecks your body for a number of reasons, can really mess up your sleep, which kind of throws everything off. So really be careful about that stuff. So let's get into the test, this genetic test. And maybe, Amy, if you can talk a little bit more here about, like, what are the reasons why someone would want to get tested? Like, what's going on there? What's the benefit?
Well, everything that you have listed here, any kind of, indication that there are any of these things going on, the symptoms that you mentioned: depression, anxiety, panic, attention issues, sleep difficulties, difficulty detoxifying for sure. But so any of these reasons, but honestly, I feel that everyone would benefit from knowing this information. And, even if if they're not struggling with symptoms and they have no diagnoses, which is wonderful. And let's say another reason for testing would be if you have an elevated homocysteine level, because elevated homocysteine is detrimental, of course. But even if you don't have that, it would be a good idea to know what you inherited from your parents and what variants in the genes that you might have, so that you can continue to support them properly nutritionally and with your lifestyle, so we can keep you not having those symptoms, and we can keep your homocysteine level low, and we can continue to support good methylation as we, so not only, now to promote and optimize your health now, but also as you age. And as we're aging, methylation tends to be different for a number of reasons, from what I understand. But I think anyone would benefit. And then here's the other thing. Medication. We hope that no one, that's what we do. We want to prevent the need for ever taking a medication. But let's say someone does need a medication for whatever reason, that ordering practitioner, whoever's prescribing, needs to know what your methylation genes, where you've got the variants, because it does impact what medications should or could and could not be or should not be suggested. So I think it's important from that perspective. So even if you're not struggling with symptoms, kind of as a preventative, okay, I have this information, knowledge is power, I think. And, so that you can continue being on that path to optimal health.
I'm really glad you pointed out that last one. Because when I got down this rabbit hole and started getting the feedback, I don't take any medications, but it told me based on my genetic profile, talk to your doctor if you're taking any of these things. Like, you really need to watch out because this is contraindicated for you based on your genetics. And I think that's a really big thing that in our conventional medical system, they just haven't caught up to this stuff yet. And they're still looking at the symptoms and treating with the pill, and that's the way they're doing it, and that's fine. But there could be a lot of situations where they're actually causing harm because they're doing something that's contraindicated for the genetics, which is a huge deal, right?
Mm-hmm. And another thing we didn't mention, if you got impaired immunity, because remember, methylation is important for producing immune cells and immune cell function. So if you're constantly, getting sick, or, your immune system is constantly being activated, or, you've got chronic infections, it's another good idea. It could be impacted by your methylation genes.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I got so passionate about this after going through my test and getting insights, it just made me aware there's a lot of people out there that they're concerned about what's going on in their family history. Their heart disease runs in my family, something they're hearing. If that's something you're concerned about, look under the hood, like find out the truth about what's really going on, and it doesn't just stop with the chronic things that run in your family, but food sensitivities, digestive disorders, if you have low energy, if you have mood disorders, all this provides nutritional insight to help you find out what's best for you. And again, we're very big on individualization. It's very important. The level of nutrients needed to support you, it could be different from your partner or your neighbor. Everybody's different, and this helps us see that.
Right.
So again, what can a genetic test do for you? Some things to highlight here. And basically summarize, it gives you guidance on specific nutrients that you want to address based on your genes and the proper forms to utilize. So I think that's really important because, there's obviously a lot of genes a lot of nutrients out there that are quote unquote beneficial, but do I need to focus on these or do I need to focus on these? So it really can save me a lot of time and move the needle according to what's going to make my health better. And again, we've been talking about symptoms versus the root causes, but helping you discover the root causes of any digestive disorder or energy issues you may have, or any mood orders. You want to get to the root issue, and helps you see what foods to eat more of and what foods to avoid based on your genes. This is further from like the foods that all genes should avoid.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into first. Here, we'll get into my test. What everybody sees right here is my test. You see a bunch of yellow boxes and green boxes and red boxes. Amy's going to break that down, but I know something a lot of people are probably thinking right now is like, what's the difference between genetic nutrition tests and something that looks at my ancestors, right? Like 23andMe. Like, what's the difference between those and what it's going to show us?
Mm-hmm. Well, the difference with this test is it is starting with what I believe to be probably the most important set of genes to be zeroing in on, because remember, this particular pathway, methylation, goes on to impact how your other genes are expressed. Other genetic tests are not going to tell you that. So this particular test zeroes in on this fundamental biochemical process that we all have going on right now. And to make it the most efficient, we're identifying variants, which we'll talk about in the different genes, and then how to approach it. So I feel like this test is, because it's zeroing in on these 5 in the methylation pathway, it makes the commentary the commentary that it provides makes this topic of methylation much more simplified, because methylation genes overall, it's not an easy topic. It's very complex, but I think the report makes it easier to understand. And then, as you said, Chad, it is also based on the person's variants in the genes. It goes on to tell you, okay, you need to address the need for these particular foods and for these particular nutrients. It tells you exactly how to support your enzymes, or these genes we'll talk about, to kind of compensate for the weaknesses, if you want to call it that, the variations in the genes that you've inherited from your parents.
Yeah, and we'll get to my story in a second. I asked you to share a couple examples of patients that you've worked with, and you said one 45-year-old male reported worsening anxiety and insomnia after starting a high dose of folic acid and immune support nutrients. However, after learning of his genetic variants within the methylation pathway, a homozygous positive for COMT and MTHFR, we reduced his quercetin dose and replaced the folic acid with methylfolate. Within a couple of weeks of doing so, he noted a significant improvement in sleep and mood. And you also said, shared another one about a 60-year-old female who reported elevated symptoms of homocysteine, cardiovascular symptoms, fatigue, and responding poorly to medication. And the methyl detox profile identified SNPs and MTRR, MTR, and MTHR. And after improving her eating pattern and starting proper supplementation with the correct forms of B vitamins, magnesium, and zinc, her homocysteine decreased to an optimal range. Her physician was able to reduce her medication, and she reported better tolerance. So that I love hearing about what's possible with this test and the direction it can give us.
Yes, absolutely. Those were really pretty significant. I mean, it's fascinating when you talk to people and you go over the test results and you ask certain questions, which I will certainly ask you as well. And what they say, oh my gosh, yeah, I struggle with that all the time. And I'll say, well, that's because it's really not uncommon to struggle with that with a particular gene variant. But again, it doesn't have to be, as long as we're, doing the right thing to support the activity of that particular gene, support it properly with correct nutrition and lifestyle. So the first example, he was supplementing with folic acid. Well, he had the variant in the MTHFR, so he wasn't converting it all into the active form, which your cells use. So that goes on to cause problems downstream. And that was really the big reason the first person was struggling so much.
Mm-hmm. All right. So now the exciting part. This here, everyone, is my test. These are my genetic nutrition test results. So Amy, maybe start by kind of explaining what the colors mean in the boxes, and because we see green, we see yellow, we see red, and then also what a variant means, and then we can get into some of the questions you might have for me based on my genetic profile.
Right. Okay. So first, let me show you what I said. So basically, here's the little part of the biochemical pathway, which is methylation. And honestly, it's much more complex than what's being shown here. But but this is, I think, a nice simplified form. And you probably have seen biochemistry charts. There's hundreds and hundreds of other pathways that are branching off from this. So this is the methylation part of it. Now, the 5 genes that are looked at in this pathway are they're represented by the color coding rectangles. And ultimately, let's start at the bottom of the page. The folic acid, you see this over on the left-hand side, kind of like we just said about that testimonial that I shared. That folic acid, that's the inactive form of folate. Your cells can do nothing with that. So you'll see it, if you follow the arrows, it goes through a conversion. And then this one gene, what genes are doing here is they're either encoding or providing instructions for the production of an enzyme, or they're acting as enzymes themselves. And in biochemistry, what happens is enzymes are responsible for driving the process to the next step. So if you see where the enzyme and the gene appears in this pathway, you can see what's around it, and the arrows that it points to, what is it necessary for? Now, back up a second. Remember, what methylation is a donation of a methyl group from one molecule to the next. So the first part of this is folic acid. Cells can't do anything with that. You got to convert it into the active form. The MTHFR gene here is responsible for taking that last step and converting it into what you see in this green outline box. Can you see my cursor? Can you see?
No, I don't think we can see your cursor.
Oh, so okay. Well, I'm pointing to the 5-methyl THF, which is in the green outline box right up on top of the MTHFR. That is the active form of folate, and that is a methyl donor. Very, very key nutrient to methylation. That's what folic acid has got to turn to in order for your cells to use it, right? Then it goes on to, you'll see MTR and MTRR. And that they're responsible for taking that homocysteine that you see in that circle there on the right and reconverting it into what you see in the left, this amino acid methionine. And how it does that is it gives it a methyl group. It gives it homocysteine a methyl group to convert it into methionine. All right, so ultimately what's happening is it's converting. You see at the very top of the page below the yellow comp, you see this nutrient SAMe. Right, SAMe in the green outline box. Well, SAMe stands for S-adenosylmethionine, which is considered the master methyl donor. That SAMe is going to go on, and you see this arrow that it points up to. Here's where those two, you see I summarized two types of methylation. The metabolic methylation, the neurotransmitter production, the detoxification, the clearing out of the toxins and histamine and hormones and so forth. And then you see the DNA at the top, DNA methylation. So the whole process is working to create this SAMe, which is going to go on, right? Now, the color-coded boxes, what does it mean? Okay, well, first of all, what is a variant? Genes are made up, the building blocks of genes, the building blocks of our DNA, they're called nucleotides. And you might have heard of these: adenosine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. Those are the four. And they're abbreviated A, T, C, G, right? So whenever you see those little pictures of DNA with the helix and you see the little letters A and T, that's what nucleotides are. Well, the wild type of the gene has a particular DNA sequence that is shared by most of the population, what occurs most naturally. That is called the wild type, right? And just so you know, the wild type is represented in green here, where Chad is green for his AACY gene. And then when there's a variant, another word for variant is variation. Another word is called single nucleotide polymorphism. They abbreviate it SNP, NSP. You might have heard people call them mutations. We don't call them that. They're not mutations. But that, just to kind of put in perspective for you, some people call it that. All right, so if there's what a variant means is they took that regular, what happened is in that regular DNA sequence, one of those nucleotides, the A, the T, the C, the G, was either deleted and removed, or it was substituted with another, or the position of it moved in the sequence. That is what creates a variation. So a variant is now going to reduce the enzyme activity. All right, so what yellow means, now remember, the color coding here is telling us what Chad inherited from his parents. The yellow means that Chad inherited one parent gave him a variant in that particular gene, and the other parent gave him the wild type. So that's called heterozygous positive, one parent. So if one parent passed on a variant, he's not the wild type for that gene. So he's yellow, meaning, okay, this enzyme activity is lessened somewhat. It's lessened. Now, red, like Chad is for NTRR, means homozygous positive. Both parents pass on a variant to Chad, both parents. Now, that means that the enzyme activity is lessened even more. But I don't want anyone to think that there's no enzyme activity. It doesn't mean there's no enzyme activity. It just means that it's reduced. So if it's reduced, then it could, if the enzyme activity is reduced, then what it's responsible for doing in this pathway is also probably reduced. So, for example, folic acid for Chad, MTHFR has got a variant. So his folic acid, if you do take in any folic acid, and I'm quite sure you're avoiding it, but if you were to take it in, you're not going to convert all of that folic acid into the active form of the folate, right? And that could go on and have further downstream effects on your homocysteine, on your brain chemistry, on your detoxification ability. Okay, so that's what it means for a variant, and that's what the color coding means. Now, before I go on to ask you some questions, Ted. Did all that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, essentially, the green means we have 2 wild genes from our parents. The yellow means we have 1 variant. And by variant, you mentioned enzymatic activity. So something is going on with our own operating system that's preventing us from getting all the raw materials we need to keep that area as healthy as possible. And if we do have a variant, or if we have 2 variants and it's red, it's a really a kind of a little red flag to just say, hey, just ping, you need to make sure that this area is covered in some form through your nutrition, through your lifestyle, through your supplements, and kind of point us in the right direction. Am I getting that?
Yeah,
And
that's absolutely the truth, because genes, don't define us really. I mean, so Chad, you're not going to change the fact that you're yellow for the MTHR, MTR, and you're red for the MTRR and so forth. You're not going to change that, but how they behave and how they work, you can support it properly nutritionally by doing the right thing, and addressing the right nutrients and foods. Can I ask, do you have kids?
Don't have kids. I do have a little golden doodle though, but
Okay.
she's not from my genes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So this is why, because remember, each parent has 2 copies of something to pass on to us, right? But they're only going to pass on 1. So for your MTRR, you have kids, you only have a variant to pass on to them because you got 2 variants, right? You only have 1 to pass on. Now, mom, we don't know what mom. So if you have kids, at least your kids are going to be yellow for your MTRR. So it's kind of cool for people to also see as parents, what was passed on to kids. It's pretty cool.
Got it.
I saw a question come in already. Is it common to have variants? Yes, it is very, very common. I think it's less common to not have variants in the genes.
Yeah, and on that, I think you kind of highlighted this, but just because you have a variant doesn't mean there's like anything wrong with you. It's just a heads up, and it's like a direction. It says that's the direction you need to go to get optimal health, but you're not flawed in any way. So please don't look at it in that way.
Right.
So maybe now would be a good time to kind of go into my test, and you're looking at my test, like what kind of things would I may be more likely to have as far as symptoms or health issues, and kind of walk us through that.
Well, the first thing that jumps out at me is your variant in the COMT. So that COMT is, that gene is encoding for an enzyme that you see what it's pointing to, right? One of the things it's pointing to is neurotransmitters, so brain chemistry. So not unusual for people with the COMT variant to struggle with anxiety, panic, depression, sleep difficulties, attention issues, irritability. Does any of that ring a bell for you?
It rings a super big bell to me. This is actually one of the reasons why I am so passionate about this test, is because I grew up extremely depressed. Like there's almost no pictures of me smiling as a child. I was given the diagnosis of ADD and ADHD and all that. And there was even a period in my 20s where I took medication for this for like 7 years, and it impacted my life significantly. But it really wasn't until I started to figure out my nutrition and going down this rabbit hole and ultimately to things like this, and made the changes that like everything vanished. Like I became happy, like anxiety went away, my ability to focus became a lot more clear. There was clearly no need for medications anymore. So it really it gave me an aha in terms of the power of nutrition and proper supplementation and lifestyle, and really how like a lot of people are just being misled, right? And improperly diagnosed, not looking at stuff like this. So yeah, that resonates with me in a huge way.
Yes, absolutely. So in other words, you started doing the right thing, maybe even before you had this genetic information, started doing the right thing previously, and you already knew you changed it. And of course, this is answering the questions why.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll show you, I took this test about 6 months ago. So it's been steps, right? There was the first step of like getting rid of all those foods I should avoid and focusing on whole food. But when I took the nutritional test, it kind of dialed it in even a little more. And it said like, hey, these are the things you really, really want to focus on. And I was already eating some of those things, but like double down on those things a little bit. And it made a huge difference in how I felt.
Yes, good. Absolutely. And I can see why. Now, the other question I would ask you is, because look at, you got a variant in the MTR, yellow, right? And you got 2 variants in the MTRR. So those 2 are key enzymes, or coding for enzymes that are going to help to take that homocysteine that you see over there and reconvert it into methionine. Because remember, homocysteine in excess is detrimental. It causes inflammation. It puts nicks into our artery walls. It increases the risk for, lots of things, but especially, like I said, stroke, cardiovascular disease. So my suggestion for anyone really with any variants here is to have the homocysteine level measured, because that's a nice biomarker to kind of keep tabs on to see how we're doing with our methylation. So Chad, have you had a homocysteine level measured lately?
Not lately, I have not.
Okay, yeah. So I would suggest that you do that. And just for the attendees, American Heart Association, like they'll accept under a 15 for homocysteine, but that's not ideal. Ideal is a 5 to an 8. So I would suggest that. And then, okay, so why don't we go to the second page?
This one right here. What's this showing us?
Right. So this is the second page to the report. And this is showing us where Chad received showing you what variants of the genes are actually tested. So if you look at the top of the page, we see your MTHFR, right? There are many variants, but the most studied are the ones that they tested here. The C677T, the A1298C. Remember how I was saying C and T and A and C? That's showing you the type of variant that it is, right? And then you go to the next column, you're heterozygous positive, meaning one parent gave you C677T, one parent gave you A1298C. It could have been the same parent. But you have variants both of those, because some people will only have a variant in one of them. All right. So just so that you know, the A1298C variant, when people have that, is less of a concern than the C677T, unless a person has both. All right. So so you have them both. So your enzyme activity with both of those is estimated to be reduced by about 50%. And the C677T more commonly associated with cardiovascular risk, high homocysteine. The A1298C more commonly associated with neurotransmitter imbalances, like you already reported that you were struggling with when you were a kid, right? Which you seem to have resolved, right, with good nutrition. Now, so that's what this page tells you. And then the commentary you'll see, like Chad mentioned earlier, there's medication in here that should be anyone who's prescribing should use caution, and it lists some of those. Down at the bottom COMT, where you see the variant where Chad is heterozygous, meaning one parent gave him the variant. That is the one that is more commonly associated with neurotransmitter imbalances, like what you mentioned, depression and attention issues. And of course, people also mention sleep difficulties. So this is making sense to me with hearing what you reported.
Yeah, this is really helpful and super interesting. And I love that at the bottom, like you said, it summarizes it really easily. And it also, it puts up a red flag, like no matter what, talk to your physician if you're doing sort of these things right there, because it's information that the physicians, they don't necessarily have, but it's really important for them to have that. So what about this next one here?
Okay, so I've already seen some comments in the chat that this seems like too difficult, too complex. So when you look at this though, this is where I feel like it's most helpful. Even if people don't really understand what's going on in that pathway on the first page, it's okay. It's not an easy issue, but all the variants in the genes that Chad has variants in are all listed within these 5 genes are listed on this page 3. And what's nice about this is it tells you what to address, So if you look at the first column, what do we address for COMT? Well, the COMT variant that you have. And by the way, that's listed first. And why is that listed first? Listed first because if we don't support the COMT variant that you have, and if we start suggesting a whole bunch of methylfolate for you, or you start taking methylcobalamin, it might exacerbate symptoms that people with the COMT variant report, like sleep difficulties and panic and anxiety and that sort of thing. So that's why COMT is listed first. We got to work on this first. So how do we do that? Well, we have to make sure that you're getting enough methionine, which is an amino acid, right? So you're having plenty of protein. So we start with the foods that are good sources of protein. The helper in the process is the mineral magnesium. So it tells you right here what we have to address the need for, and then we go into the foods that are good sources of those. But if you look in the third column, this is the kind of like little kind of different thing with the COMT variant, that drugs, people who are taking medication can certainly inhibit the COMT or inhibit any of these really, but the high doses of certain what we call bioactive food components that are normally quite helpful, but high doses in supplementation can be detrimental to the COMT because it can inhibit it. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't have any of this stuff, like you see green tea here and quercetin, or, I'm not saying people shouldn't have quercetin-rich foods or green tea. But if we take high doses of them, people can end up with an inhibited COMT enzyme even more, and it kind of makes sleep worse, and it makes anxiety worse and panic worse. So I always ask that question. Doesn't mean we can't have any of it, but I always ask. So Chad, do you supplement with anything that has green tea in it, or the EGCG, which is the nutrient in green tea? Do you supplement with quercetin at all?
Quercetin, yes. Yeah, and I have a little green tea every now and then.
Okay, so now what I would say to you and anyone who's taking quercetin, which is a very, very popular nutrient these days, especially with COVID, because it's an immune supporter. So I would ask anyone who's already taking it, who has a COMT variant, I would ask, well, how did you do when you started it? Did you still continue to feel fine? Was your sleep good? Was your mood good? Your attention issues? How was all that? If it was good, then to me, you're probably taking the right amount and stick with it. If not, because some people will say, no, my gosh, everything's through the roof. I can't sleep. My anxiety is bad. How about you?
Yeah, I didn't experience anything negative. We have some quercetin in our native defense, actually. Yeah. Which is why, and it's not an over the top amount. It's a very safe dose, which is why I think I was in a good place there.
Yeah. So basically, it's working for you then, right? Yeah. And then for others, it might not. So we might say, well, we've got to get that immune support another way. It doesn't mean it has to be from quercetin, but so that's not across the board. You can't take it. It's just, let's ask if people are taking it and how they felt when they started it. And then, so that we got to do, we got to support the COMT, make sure that Chad's eating enough protein rich foods, and we make sure that he's eating enough magnesium, which we'll get to those food sources. And then the MTHFR, which remember is at the bottom of the page. What nutrients do we have to address the need for in this column? It tells you right here, 5-MTHF, which that's the active form of the folate that our cells use. We need to address the need for that. So is Chad eating a number of good food sources of folate, like the greens and the beets and the green leafies and the citrus fruits and so forth? Methyl donors, we call them. And I would, of course, hopefully that's, because we want people to, as we keep saying, foods first. So we need to address that food intake, and then the helpers in the process, which are called cofactors: riboflavin, niacin, magnesium, and zinc. So those are the ones, to zero in on, and the good food sources of those. And then when you look at MTR and MTRR, what is the big nutrient that does its job to help those enzymes? It's B12. But notice there's 3 types of B12 listed there. So what should we take? Well, when I'm working with somebody who is struggling with sleep difficulties and anxiety and panic, I won't suggest methylcobalamin. I will suggest, which of course is the active form, I would suggest hydroxy or adenosylcobalamin because it's more gentle, if they have to supplement, that is, if they have to supplement. But so anyway, I won't have, belabor this, but the first column tells us what nutrients to address. And then, the third column tells you a little bit about the food. And then if supplementation is needed, we don't typically suggest high dose because there's not a lot known about high dose supplementation. But if we need supplementation, there's some guidelines over on the far right as well, far right column.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I kind of feel like I'm resonating with a lot of people when the sciencey stuff, like the first two pages, it sounds sciencey. It can sound a lot of confusing, especially the first two pages. But this here for me was really the actionable stuff where it's broken down very simply. And it's like, hey, based on what's going on and what variants I have, this is where I really need to focus my attention. These type of foods, these type of supplements. And since I've been doing that, that's when I've been noticing a lot of changes in my energy and my mood and made a big difference.
That's
So,
awesome. That's awesome.
and what about this one here? This food and lifestyle first, and some of the dietary sources of key methylation nutrients. What's happening on
Yeah,
this page?
I like to remind people that, yeah, absolutely. You know, nutrition is extremely important. I wouldn't be a nutritionist if I didn't believe that. It is. So is the rest of our lifestyle. You know, so all of this impacts methylation. So we all really need to do this. So, you know, GI, you know, gut health, you know, everything, as you keep, I'm sure you keep hearing from practitioners, everything starts in the gut. So if we have we have an overgrowth of unfriendly bacteria in the gut, you know, that uses up methyl groups. You know, they're kind of methyl depleters, let's call them. So we need to focus on gut health. And then friendly bacteria tends to produce methylfolate. So, you know, we want more friendly bacteria. So that's going to lead someone like me to suggest things like fermented foods, but probably supplementing with a probiotic as well, a good probiotic supplement. You know, following an anti-inflammatory eating pattern, avoiding things that cause oxidative stress, like all the things that you were mentioning before, Chad, you know, the avoiding refined grains and the mercury in fish and the seed oils and trans fats, because all of those lead to inflammation. All of those increase oxidative stress within the body, and that uses up the methylation pathway. I mean, you're calling upon your methylation to kind of take care of that and repair it and reduce the inflammation. You know, then of course it's not going on to do its other job. So we want to avoid things that are methylation drainers or depleters. Hydrate with enough filtered water, preferably. Everything that you had said. That's very, very important for good methylation. And then this bottom chart, the dietary sources of the key methylation nutrients. So you saw in that chart on page 3, what nutrients to address the need for. The active form of the folate, the vitamin B2, niacin, magnesium, the vitamin B12, zinc, methionine. And these are all the ones that Chad needs to support these are all the nutrients that Chad needs to address to support his methylation because of the variants he has in the genes. So I usually tell people circle what you eat frequently to kind of get an idea. Are you meeting your nutrient requirement with your food? And if not, we need to increase it, right? So that is, you know, those are going to be direct foods that are going to help with your methylation. Methyl donors are, like we said before, like the greens and the beets and the citrus fruits. But guess what? So are organ meats. You know, so is, you know, the liver, pasture, you know, liver and organ meats. You know, some people, you know, think about it. In the liver, every nutrient goes to the liver. So the liver is going to be a good source of everything, really. So if you eat liver, great. I happen to not eat it, but, you know, people who want to get it that way, you know, you could take a liver extract, liver supplement. There are greens, you know, some decent supplements that have greens and beets in them, as long as it's good stuff. But again, food first. Then the one last thing I want to say about food is there are these components in plants called adaptogens. And what adaptogens do is work to achieve balance in a biochemical pathway. So in other words, if more of something is needed, they'll direct it. It's kind of like they direct where methylation is supposed to happen, and they direct where it doesn't happen. So like you say, like a conductor of an orchestra, it's similar to that, or directing traffic, really. So that's what adaptogens do. And all these plant foods that you see, the good variety of vegetables, the good variety of different colored fruits, different colors is what would indicate the different variety of phytonutrients in there. They're all going to help to act as adaptogens to help your genes to behave appropriately and to turn on the genes that we want on and turn off the genes that we want off.
Yeah, I love this. And I love that you said circling the foods, right? Like that we're already eating. For me, this was probably the most helpful page, right? Because it showed like what exact nutrients I needed and what foods I really needed to focus on to really make a positive change in what's happening with my genetics. So I just circled these foods and I'm like, I'm gonna go shopping for those foods. You know, those are the ones I want to focus on the most. And I've been eating these more frequently, and I think it's made a big difference. You know, I think this is where the customization and individualization, the prescription really comes to form right here, based on all the things we saw earlier.
Yes, absolutely.
So to summarize here real quick, what each page tells you, we're going to look at 5 different pages. Page 1 reveals which variants you have. Remember the boxes of red, the green, and the yellow. Page 2 is going to explain each variant in more depth. And the first 2 pages are real sciencey. If it was confusing, don't worry, because page 3, 4, and 5 makes it simple for you. So 3 shares what nutrients and foods you need for each variant. Page 4 breaks down food and lifestyle tips that support methylation. And page 5 is going to share the scientific references that back each section of the report. And then I want to talk a little bit more about why NativePath is partnering with Cell Science Systems. And I hope by now everyone understands the value of individualization and the genetic component that it plays in our health. But we really, we love Cell Science Systems. Cell Science Systems Corporation is a federally and state licensed laboratory and FDA registered medical device company established in 2004, which is international and the recipient of government and private research grants. And Cell Science provides the innovative proprietary testing and collaborates with major universities worldwide, like Yale University School of Medicine, University of Georgetown, University of Texas, Baylor, Ohio State, and several others. Cell Science was the recipient of the Frost & Sullivan Company of the Year Award for food intolerance testing in 2016. It's the only year the award was given, and Cell Science is considered the best functional medicine lab in the country. So here's what you get with the methyl detox profile kit. You're going to get a swab and send test that takes a direct look at your unique DNA. It's really easy, and I'm going to send you a video after this if you choose to move forward with the test, but you just put it right there, put it back in the test kit, send it off. You're also going to get detailed nutritional advice based on your genes, and there's going to be a supplement and lifestyle recommendations from that. And there's also going to be group calls with a nutritionist twice a week. I think it's really important because sometimes when we get these tests, we're like, okay, I need someone to translate this for me. I need this broken down a little bit. We're going to have calls set up every week, 2 calls a week with, I'm going to be on the first call. I think Amy, you're going to be on the first call. We're going to do these calls as long as we need to answer everybody's questions. So that you get the insights that you feel like you need to move forward with your health. And again, these bonus calls are very, very, very valuable. So group calls twice a week. We're going to review the samples. It's your chance to ask questions if you have any more about how to read your results and learn about unique genes and get started with specific nutritional changes. We really want to make sure that you're supported on this journey and as you go down this rabbit hole. So here's an example of how you can use your test results. And if this still sounds confusing, you know, we're going to break it down really easy. So let's go through an example of exactly how you can use your test results to change your gene expression and your health. So imagine that your test results show that you have the COMT gene. It has one variant, and the COMT gene plays a role in breaking down your neurotransmitters and is important for your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that makes decisions. COMT variants can be associated with anxiety, depression, panic, trouble sleeping, and other issues. So the health of this gene is important. For the COMT gene to work well, it needs to get enough methionine, magnesium, and B vitamins. And this is exactly what your methyl detox profile will tell you, along with the foods to eat to keep your COMT gene in balance and reduce your risk of mental health issues associated with the COMT related problems. It's important to note that having a variant in a gene does not mean that your gene is automatically unhealthy or working incorrectly. Most people have variants in some of their genes, and sometimes a variant simply means that you're at a higher risk for others for issues related to that gene. On the other hand, people without any variants sometimes develop gene issues due to unhealthy eating or lifestyle choices. So again, it points you in that right direction. So I am not a numbers guy, but I have worked with our team where we have a very special offer for you. So I want to make sure we have this offer. Since you've taken the time to be with us live, myself and Amy on our webinar today, and you're a part of our community, Plus, it's the first time that we partnered with Cell Science Systems, and we're very excited to get these tests into your hands. So today, we only have 200 test kits to mail out at this time, and today is the only time this incredible deal will be available for $100 off. We're going to really want to make sure that we get this as many people's hands as possible, and really give you the next steps into going down this rabbit hole and finding out more about your genes and what foods are right for you, what supplements are right for you, so you can optimize your health. So thank you so much. At this time, you can lock in your special discount by pricing by either clicking the link Coach Rachel or Coach Krista entered in the chat. And we will also email you not only a recording of this webinar, but the link where you can sign up for the genetic nutritional test. Again, it's super easy, gets mailed to you immediately. And we're going to send you a video where I myself walk you through how to fill out everything, send it back, and then you can begin the weekly calls twice a week to get any of your any questions answered anytime you want. So with that, now we can go to our live Q&A. I think, Amy, we have a bunch of questions, but we can go ahead and get started here.
Okay.
So let's see what we got. Let's see. So Virginia says, I have stage 3 kidney disease. What should I do to help stave off any further damage? Anything that the test can provide for Virginia, and any insights there?
Stage 3 kidney disease. Well, let's put it this way. I feel like it could only help to know what your genes are in methylation, because of course methylation is working to assist every organ system in the body ultimately. So I would say it's certainly not going to hurt to do this test. With regard to the kidney disease and what's suggested nutritionally to manage that, very, very specialized field of nutrition. And of course, it depends on what your, of course, physician's recommendation is. But depending on what your kidney markers, of course, say in your blood work, and what's elevated, what's not elevated, would also determine what what to limit or what to emphasize. So my suggestion is to work with a nutrition expert who can direct you in that regard.
Yeah, at the very least, Virginia, let's make sure we're getting rid of those foods that we talked about avoiding, right? The refined grains, the toxic fats. Make sure you're drinking lots of water, moving your body. Like, make sure you're doing those basic things. And if you need help, Virginia, on that, just email our customer care center at cs@nativepath.com and ask for the Native Body Reset. We have a really great nutritional guides to give you that can point you in the right direction for that. But the test also can be very valuable in helping you really dial in on what foods you most need. Abraham said, I received my first order of NativePath collagen. I've been reading and watching videos saying that marine collagen is better than animal collagen, while some say marine collagen does not absorb well in your body. What is the truth on this? Yeah, Abraham, I'm not really a big fan of marine collagen. It all comes down to absorption and bioavailability of that collagen. So type 1, type 3 from the bovine hide of the cow is really that's where you want to focus on, and that's what ours is. So I always suggest giving ours a shot for at least 3 months and seeing what happens. But we have countless testimonials of people who have switched over from marine collagen and doing better there. Salwa, I hope I pronounced that right, Salwa, said, I have migraines, hypertension, hypothyroidism, post-radioactive iodine, postmenopausal stress, weight, stubbornness, anxiety, nitrite, all supplements. Now I am total confusion with the body. I wish you can help me decipher my root cause. This is a good question, Amy. Like, someone like Salwa, like, she mentioned a lot of things here that I think the genetic test can point out.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely recommend this test. And because absolutely everything that was mentioned can be associated with the methylation and genetic variants. So let's at least make sure that we're supporting that properly. And I'm sure there are other things to look at, and of course avoiding the foods that you've already suggested earlier on in the presentation. But yeah, absolutely, I was suggesting the test. And then, within the group sessions that we do, keep in mind that it's a group, so we will be going over the results in general as a group, and whether or not to get into the individualization of it and dig deeper and know about all this kind of thing and within the group session, that would be kind of up to you if you're willing to talk about it. And then the nutritionist, whether it's me or somebody on my team, can certainly make suggestions from there.
Yeah, and Sawa also said she's tried lots of supplements, not nitrite. I eat healthy, not much exercise now, have plantar fasciitis and tendonitis and knees, hip all seem inflamed. So again, with that, like the test can help you out in terms of eating, help you eat even more healthy. But if you have plantar fasciitis, I would try to look that up. So if you go to nativepath.com, if you put in foot, and if you put in knee, and if you put in hip, there's a lot of great video exercises that I can show you and walk you through, and we can get that inflammation down. Yeah, it's really great. So another question from Linda here is, I have PTSD from my deployment as a combat medic and panic attacks at night and night terrors, and what gene I kind of lost it there. What gene do I want turned off? Do you know what genes you would want turned off for that?
Not directly, but I would say any of the genes, and I don't mean to say like, oh, it's all about methylation, but absolutely knowing what the variants are in the methylation pathway to make sure it's balanced.
Right.
To make sure the genes that you are turning on and turning off are the ones that we want to, so that I think would be step one. And then of course, incorporating, a health promoting eating pattern to support that with the adaptogens will help to direct those methyl groups to go to where they should go. But unfortunately, I don't know a gene directly associated with the PTSD, except for the COMT, with regard to the COMT and how it impacts neurotransmitter imbalance.
Yeah, I think someone like me, if I was a combat medic, I'd probably have some pretty severe PTSD based on my genetic expression, right? And what's happening. So that's a good example, Linda, of what my test showed, and maybe it's something that can help you as well and point you in the right direction. So let's see, where are we at here? Next question. Lisa said, I'd like to know why some brands of collagen have better results that are actually noticeable while others really. Yeah, so Lisa, going back to quality, it is all about quality. It's just like I was talking about with the quality of protein, and it's where animals come from. You're not just what you eat, you are what you eat eats. And unfortunately, there's a lot of collagen out there that comes from animals raised in a feedlot, given grains and hormones and antibiotics that have never had grass, and lots of really bad stuff. So quality and purity is of the utmost importance. So that's why we really believe in our collagen. Christine says, how about grapeseed oil? I'm generally not a fan of grapeseed oil. Do you have an opinion on that, Amy? Definitely not a heat.
Yeah, I mean, if it's, I think the cold pressed, right? For most of these oils would be the first to start with. But yeah, like you said, the highly processed one, as long as it's not highly processed, the grapeseed as itself actually has some antioxidant qualities. But I think the most, like you said, the most important oils would be coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, grass-fed butter. Those would be, you could utilize those would be the top.
Yes, they're safer fats. And again, if anybody wants the guide on fats, just you want that native body reset, just go ahead and email our customer care center at cs@nativepath.com. Say, I want that reset. We'll give it to you for free. You get a free fat guide you can print out, put it on your fridge, go shopping with it. Makes it really easy. Lisa said, a friend feels that anything fried should be using peanut oil. What can I tell him to help him teach that even peanut oil is not advisable? So Lisa, have your friend go through the native body reset and read all this stuff. Peanut oil is not healthy for you. It's not good. It might taste wonderful. It probably tastes absolutely incredible, but it's not good for you. If
I were making up the rules, we'd be able to have it on peanut butter on everything.
Same. Peanut butter is so good. It's so good.
Yeah, but I mean, anything that you fry, and you heat to a high point is not going to be a healthy oil, even if it's healthy to begin with.
Right. Yeah. And on that fat guide, we also talk about which fats are the most safe for high heats, what are ones for safest for medium heats. Jilla said, is it okay to take folic acid during pregnancy? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And honestly, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I would rather see where, if you have a variant in your MTHFR, to be able to determine, would you be okay with folic acid in your prenatal vitamin? Because a lot of them have the folic acid. And of course, we as nutritionists look at it and go, well, geez, I can't suggest this folic acid for this person because she's got the MTHFR variant. We want to suggest the active form of the folate. So it's not directly answering your question, except to say, I would rather know if you have an MTHFR variant, because if you don't, and you take folic acid in, yes, you will be converting it to the active form of the folate. And this is why I think that fortification program, when they use folic acid in the different, not that I would suggest any fortified foods, the grain, the white grains or refined grains or anything, but that's why I think overall they reduce the incidence of birth defects, because those people probably, not everybody, but the percentage of them probably converted the folic acid into the active form. But if you've got a variant that in that MTHFR, that means you are not going to be converting all the folic acid that you take in to the active form. So I would rather know if you have a variant before I would say, yeah, go ahead and do the folic acid in your prenatal supplement. Or, yeah, I would rather you do that. But if, especially if your physician is suggesting a particular prenatal and it's just folic acid. But if not, then I would definitely say, okay, we could suggest a good multi for you that has the active form of the folate. Good prenatal.
Got it. Thank you. So we got some food supplement questions I'll kind of move through quickly here. So is sprouted wheat bread okay? It's better than the refined grains folic acid. Wheat in general, I'm generally not a fan of. I think there's other areas where you can focus on your food that's more nutritious and less harmful for your gut and better for your blood sugar. Do I need to take lecithin supplements with your probiotic? No. Don, you asked, I deep fry with rice bran oil. I don't know about that. That's if your goal is health, probably not, Don. If your goal is to make it taste amazing, maybe that would be fun. But there's probably better oils. You got to remember that deep frying and that high heat is just in general not good. So if you're going for health, I would suggest looking for other ways. So is rice bran better than olive oil? No, olive oil would be better than rice bran, especially at any heat. Barbara says, will my sleeve surgery 5 months ago impact the results of the test?
No.
Sleeve surgery, no, won't do that.
No. This
Ketty
test,
said, yeah. Ketty asked, you mentioned grains are not good for you. I have oats and cereal for breakfast. Is that okay? It's better than the fortified and refined grains. Generally, when it comes to breakfast, I suggest people start their day with more protein and fat, especially if they're coming from a metabolically challenged position and using sugar as fuel. So I tend to steer people away from carbohydrates and starches and juices and things like that, and have more quality proteins and good fats and maybe even veggies or berries.
Maybe some eggs from cage-free chickens, a big egg omelet with some loaded with broccoli and
that'd be much better for you. Tina says, can certain foods increase cortisol levels, and what is histamine clearance? Well, cortisol in food.
I would not say. I would say that here's how I would say that food can increase cortisol. If you have, let's say, a sensitivity or an allergy to a particular food that you're consuming, and the stress that that's putting on your body and on your adrenals, yes, that could increase your cortisol for that particular scenario. With regard to histamine, histamine is in foods that we eat. Histamine, of course, we're breathing it in our environment. It's also liberated from different foods that we eat. So when we have imbalances in our genes in the methylation pathway, our histamine levels can get too high. So, that pathway is responsible for clearing out too much histamine and reducing it again and keeping your histamine levels from getting too high. So common symptoms of too much histamine, I'm sure you're familiar, allergy type symptoms and runny nose and fatigue and congestion and things like that, but also gut issues, gut health issues. So, but that's what histamine clearance is. It has to do with the methylation pathway, reducing the amount of histamine that you end up having in the body as a result of your environment and what you're consuming.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a good question about the cortisol levels. Yeah. Only really inflammatory type foods could maybe have a component to that, I think. But
Mhm.
cortisol, stress hormone, when high in the beginning of the day, and it should taper off as the day goes on. And people that have a lot of issues with sleep and stress, it's almost like the inverse thing is happening with them. So
And
looking,
I'm sorry to interrupt. One of the things too that made me think of too is when our blood glucose level is way too low. I mean, we want to keep it low, but when it's too low, that increases cortisol.
yeah,
So, and honestly, I forgot to say this during the presentation, but the COMT variant is one of those that tends to put people more at risk for too low of a blood glucose. So that protein and fat that you mentioned, though, to emphasize, protein and fat holds your blood sugar in the target range. So that's very, very important to include your protein and fat in your meals and your snacks.
all right. And Salwa says, how do I do the test? How expensive? How will I read it? And will they help me? How much will that cost me? Will my PCP work with this information? How often should I do these tests to see if I improved? So yeah, how do I do the test? It's actually really simple. You just have a swab. I could pull it out right now. You open your mouth, put it in there, a little swab for like maybe 5-10 seconds, put it back in a little container, put it in an envelope, fill out your information, you send it off, and it comes back and you get your results sent to you. And yeah, we talked about how much it is. And also, if you want to learn more information, just click that link that Rachel and Krista put in there. But again, once you get those results, what's going to happen is you're going to get, first of all, you're going to get a welcome call from our NativePath team just to make sure you're good and you don't have any questions about anything immediately. And then we're going to give you a series of emails, and those emails are going to be based on your results, actually. So if you have some variants, you're going to get some unique emails different from someone else who purchased it. So we're going to go down this little rabbit hole of education. And then twice a week, we have videos or Zoom calls where you can join in and ask your questions based on your test results and get more insights on what you should do. What about this last question, Amy, on how often should I test to see if I've improved?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. And I can't believe I forgot to say that during the presentation. Those the genes that are looked at in this particular test, those 5 with those particular variants, you never have to have them looked at again, ever, because those will not change. Your variants and what you got from your parents will not change. So never again will you have to have this particular test done. Now, what to monitor to see if you are improving, I would say your homocysteine level, right? Go by your how you're doing with your symptoms and your sleep and your energy for whatever you might have been struggling with previous to the test, but definitely your homocysteine. There are also some nutrient tests that can be done to assess the nutrient status within the methylation pathway. But yeah, those particular genetic variants in the methyl detox profile, never have to have them looked at again.
Got it. And another question is this test the only test that will find the cause of all my health issues, from allergies, anxiety, depression, stress, thyroid, hypertension, resistant weight gain?
No, but I would say it is definitely the first one to start with, and it could very well be what you the information that you needed to know, because as you do the right thing based on your test results, everything that you're struggling with can certainly improve. And then if it doesn't, any practitioner who you're working with can certainly chisel away at other information they need to or other tests that might need to be done to get to the other issues that are contributing to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, because there are a lot of tests out there that could point to those things, but it's not necessarily the test that'll make the most difference and show you the most, right? Like you really want to get to the root issues. There's nothing more root than your genetics and your DNA, and finding insights on that. So you can do the other ones. It'll give you some insights, but it won't really show you like what's really the root of what's going on underneath the hood. Bernard says, are you familiar with Euphoria? Now know under the trade name Nucleogenics. I already committed to this DNA facility in September 2022. Is your DNA nutritional testing competitively effective, similar, better? I agree that you cannot just willy-nilly nutritionally fix a body with supplements that is already struggling. That is obvious too, since I have spent tens of thousands of dollars with a NativePath, who gave me boatloads of supplements to no avail. The MDM meant well, but I think. So yeah, the question here is first of all, have you heard of nucleogenics, anything like that? And is this nutritional testing competitively effective, similar, better. So we're not really sure
I
on
am
that.
not familiar with them, and there are certainly many genetic tests that are available out there. I just don't know what exactly is being tested. So I would look at that first. And of course, the reason we like this one is because it's simple. It's breaking it down into looking at the key 5 genes in the methylation pathway, which is a fundamental pathway that influences, everything that you have in the body. It is, I don't mean to say it's the only answer, but it could be a huge answer to start with.
Yeah, and also it's not tens of thousands of dollars, right?
No, right.
And nor is it going
Yeah.
to recommend you supplements that are tens of thousands of dollars. It's going to point you towards food first, which I think is so important, because that's something I see in the supplement world. A lot of practitioners won't even talk about really food, or they want to give you a test that talks about food, and they just try to supplement you way out of a bad diet, and that has to be addressed. And again, like eating the right foods for you based on your genetics, not like your metabolic type, but your actual DNA. It doesn't get more dialed in than that. So yeah, I'm sorry that experience went bad, but I don't think this experience will go bad for you. I think it'll point in the right direction. So Judith says, what foods or nutrients would be good for a fatty liver? Well, first off, like, we're going to talk about the foods that are not good for a fatty liver would be foods that are super high in fructose, like things like that, like juices and processed and refined foods that are high in sugar. Obviously, like alcohol is not good, but that's basically my take on make sure you don't eat those harmful foods, especially the ones we talked about avoiding, like grains and trans fats. Focus on whole real food. The more food you can eat without labels on it, the better, right? Like if you eat chicken breasts, like where's the label?
Right.
Do you eat broccoli?
At the grocery store.
Where's the label? Yeah. So I again, for you, and that question was from Judith, go try the Native Body Reset. And if you want more insights on really dialing in what foods are good for you based on your genetic profile, check out the test. It's really, really helpful. Stacy says, living in the South, I battle allergies a lot more and take 2 types of antihistamines daily, 1 pill, 1 nasal spray to try to stay comfortable. The spray especially helps my eustachian tube dysfunction in my ears, so it's a must to avoid fall ear infections. I struggle with taking probiotics since it can raise my histamine levels even more, and still try to take it to balance my gut. Thoughts? What would you do? What do you got on that, Amy?
Yeah. Honestly, I would have to refresh my memory of which exact strains of probiotics would be raising histamine, because I don't think it's all of them. So we would have to stick with, well, first of all, promoting gut health with plenty of vegetables and fiber helps to get the gut bacteria, growing, the good gut bacteria, I should say. And with regard to histamine, though, and the probiotics to increase it, I would have to refresh my memory on all that and stick with the probiotic strains that do not. If you have a histamine intolerance to foods too, there's, which I do, besides supporting methylation properly, there's also a gene that I have that makes me have an increased risk of histamine intolerance. So sometimes if I'm consuming something that I think is going to be elevating my histamine, not only high histamine foods, but histamine liberators, I'll take this histamine enzyme that helps to reduce it.
Okay, very good. And next question from Denise. Even though I do not eat saturated fats, gravies, etc., I have a fatty liver and I'm now pre-diabetic. What can I eat to help reverse fatty liver? I only use olive oil, avocado oil, grass-fed butter, and ghee sparingly. So yeah, I would love to hear your take on this too, Amy. But when I hear fatty liver and pre-diabetic, I'm actually, and I hear that you're eating these really good fats, I'm actually less concerned about the fat that you're eating. I want to look more into what carbohydrates you're eating and what beverages, what liquids you're drinking. So again, going back to watching out for processed and refined foods, looking out for fructose, like it's in a lot of things. So especially high fructose corn syrup, watch out for juices, sodas. It's really the carbohydrates that really mess up the liver. It's not so much these good fats. We have it sounds funny, right? Fatty liver disease. I better minimize my fat, but it's not doing that. The body will store store fat in the liver when it has way too many refined carbohydrates in it. So I would focus on that. And again, Denise, the test can be very helpful for you to point you in the right direction. And again, we have that helpful guide, the Native Body Reset, to point you in the right direction.
And I agree
Tina's,
with you. I would avoid fruit juice, and I might suggest, assuming you've avoided everything that assuming you're avoiding everything that Chad has just said, I might even suggest going a step further, if that's the case, if you're still struggling, to maybe even limit your fruit consumption to like no more than a couple servings in a day. You know, good fruit like berries, you know, something like that, but maybe not more than 2 servings in a day. And plenty of water, obviously no alcohol, which I assume you're avoiding. And then exercise, you know, exercise can help to address the fatty liver and reduce that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. I think, Denise, I think a lot of people are wondering why they have fatty liver disease, and they're like cutting out the fat. And Denise, if exercise, like if that word is challenging, just start with walking. Like one of the best things we can do is just walk down the street for 2 minutes every 45 minutes. Just movement throughout the day can make a big difference. Tina says, I read many articles on the pros and cons of taking probiotics. If you eat a proper diet, is it necessary to take a probiotic? Amy?
I happen to think that, I mean, first and foremost, it'd be nice to see what your gut microbiome is. We do like for people to start with foods first, if you can, you know, like fermented foods. But like the one attendee had said, you know, histamine. So I wanted to suggest fermented foods, but I wouldn't, you know, if there's someone who is struggling with high histamine. But if that's not you, I would suggest that you do some fermented vegetables, you know, like sauerkraut, for example. That's one way to build the friendly bacteria. Plenty of fiber in your eating pattern, because that feeds the friendly bacteria. And then I do like to suggest a good probiotic, and I usually, of course, the types that we use are only very well studied and from good suppliers such as NativePath. And you know, we usually do tell people to kind of vary it, you know, to vary the strains that they're taking as well. The best way really is eventually even having like a stool test or a microbiome test. You can see what friendly bacteria that you actually do have, you know, if you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, how you are doing with your eating pattern to promote good friendly bacteria.
Yeah, I'm generally a big fan of taking a probiotic for everybody. I'm a little biased. We like ours. It's highly researched, has a lot of good strains in there. But one thing we want to make sure is you're not trying to take a probiotic and still eating a bad diet, right? That's not going to really do you any good. So the foundation, food first. Jilla says, does MCT increase bad cholesterol? Generally not. Generally see an improvement in your cholesterol profile. The things that really hurt your cholesterol profile are the bad fats that we're talking about, and lots of sugar, grains, and things like that. Jed says, how does this compare to other food sensitivity tests like ALCAT and Everywell? That's a good question. Just generally, what's the difference between this and food sensitivity test?
Okay, this is not a food sensitivity test at all, although it's interesting that you mentioned ALCAT, because Cell Science Systems is they run the ALCAT. That's actually what they're most well known for, is the ALCAT test. So, so this is a genetic test. It's only testing your genes, and you're, like Chad described, you're going to saturate the buccal swab that you get and send that away. It's only looking at genes. So it's not going to be able to determine exactly what food sensitivities, if you have sensitivities, what you have. Now, just to tell you real quick, the difference between ALCAT and Everlywell. Everlywell is testing IgG, immunoglobulin G, which is an antibody test. And it really is only able to test, like, I think it's like 90 or 100 foods, because it's the finger stick. So they're looking into capillary blood, and there's only so much you can test. ALCAT looks at over 500 substances, and it's a leukocyte activation test. Quite accurate. It's what is leading, when it comes to food sensitivities, what is leading to inflammation, because the leukocytes, the white blood cells, are reacting. So ALCAT is measuring white blood cells, not antibodies, like Everlywell.
Got it. Thank you for that question, Jed. Next question, would this test Will this test figure out what to eat if I have bones deteriorating at a fast level? That's a really good question. We have a lot of people that are in our community for bone health. So is there any things that this test can give with insights towards bone health or supplements or foods that they might need to eat to make their bones stronger?
It's not going to directly look at any genes that are helpful to directly build bone or ones that actually work to decrease bone density. But like one of the things that I had mentioned is the methylation genes, though, actually, because of their impact on turning on and turning off certain genes, you'll determine where your variants are. Those can go on to impact those bone health genes. So from that perspective, yes, but you're going to this test is focusing on methylation.
Yeah, very good question. Very good question.
Mm-hmm.
And Barbara says, I'm postmenopausal, but for years now, I still have hot flashes and night sweats. Can anything be done for me? I'm beyond the age of hormone treatment. So really, I guess for hot flashes and night sweats, what can this test do to help someone in that position?
Well, first, I like to see the information. I would wonder if COMT is a variant, because COMT is, any of the variants in the pathway can impact hormone balance. So, when we have hot flashes, when we have the symptoms of menopause, our hormones are like really all over the place. It can happen any time of the day. So from that perspective, making sure that we're addressing the right genes that could ultimately impact hormone fluctuations, that is something that can be can be addressed in this pathway as well.
All right. Next question from Brenda. Hello, Chad and Amy. I have two general questions and then another medical diagnosis to ask about. For a person in their 60s, how much would you recommend a B12 to take a day? I also have hypothyroidism and was taking Synthroid, but then learned about Armour medication and decided to switch to Armont due to feeling better on that. Is Armour an okay medication to be on for the thyroid? Actually, why don't we stop there and answer some of the questions there? So, because she's got more questions, but how much would you recommend a B12 to take a day? And that could be an individualized thing, I'm assuming as well.
Yeah. I it all depends on. Well, I think I remember you said you were 60. So, and me too. I'm 61. So when I say this, I don't want you to get insulted, because I was going to say, as we get older, we tend to produce less stomach acid. So less acid in the stomach, which is important for our B12 absorption. So even if you are eating foods that are giving you B12, which are all animal source foods, is what we are eating that's going to give us B12. Sometimes we don't have enough acid production in the stomach to be able to extract that B12 and extract our amino acids too from the protein that we eat. So from that perspective, what I mean is we might need to address stomach acid. But and I don't know, because I don't know how much B12 you're eating yet. I would say if I find out that you're telling me I'm not eating much B12 from your animal sources, then yes, I would suggest that you start eating more B12, support digestion, and then maybe a B12 supplement. But as far as what type of B12 to suggest, that's why I like for people to do this test too, this methyl detox test, because it helps me to figure out what type of B12 to suggest in a supplement. Because you may remember when we were talking about Chad's result, thinking if I had to suggest B12 for Chad, I would not be suggesting methylcobalamin for him necessarily. I would be suggesting they start with a more gentler form, so it doesn't make his symptoms worse, like what happens with a lot of people with COMT. So to answer that, I would want to know what form to suggest for you. I would love to see your test results here. And also, as far as the amount, yes, like Chad said, it depends on how much you need, if you're insufficient in B12 or not. But in general, 500 micrograms is, I think, a pretty safe dose. 1,000 micrograms of B12 is a safe dose. But again, the type of B12 is important that we determine what you need.
And you mentioned the enzymes that would help her. Her next concern was that she's been having stomach issues for almost 2 years, and the main symptom is extreme bloating and discomfort in general. Having this diagnosis affects how I feel overall, though. Like my everyday, my moods, I have done several tests so far, and I don't want to go on any medications due to the side effects if possible. My last diagnosis from doing an upper endoscopy with the GI doctor. He said that I have gastroparesis. I'm working on my diet and what foods to eat and which foods not to eat. But this is very frustrating to deal with and to try to figure out what would you suggest I do to help myself, Brenda? Yeah, I mean, I would say, as far as what foods and get you started in the right direction, start with this test. Amy, you got anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would definitely start with this test. With regard to gastroparesis, though, there are certain things that's, can like further the stomach, this further slowing of the stomach emptying. So what we'll often suggest when working with people individually is that we address consuming liquid away from your food, not at the same meal. Sometimes that helps because sometimes consuming, you might have already addressed this, but consuming liquid along with solids a lot of times can make the gastroparesis, kind of delay that stomach emptying worse. More so. And then fiber is something else that we'd have to address as far as how much, because sometimes people with gastroparesis don't do well with as much fiber as we like. So from the nutrition perspective, those would be the things that I would address besides this test.
Yes, a few other questions here. So Doreen said literature on collagen in some cases indicates that collagen should be contain 5 sources. Why do we not have that in NativePath's collagen? So again, so Doreen, we talk about this a lot actually, because we have to explain why type 1 and type 3 collagen is superior to the multi-collagen. So you hear that a lot with people out there. We have multi-collagen, we have all these different types. A lot of it is like watered down collagen, truly, because type 1 and type 3 is the most potent, most dense form of collagen. When you hear things like type 2, type 4, 6, 7, 8, it's essentially watered down, very much cheaper collagen. It's not going to make as much difference in your body. So type 1, type 3, that's what we have here at NativePath. So Callie says, in addition to bone deterioration, I create kidney stones. Do you think these two things are related? And would this test help solve why this happens and what actions I can do to change this? Any insights there, Amy?
Well, I would say for whatever part that the kidney stones has to do with your nutrient balance, your methylation status, yes, I think this test would help anyone. Directly with kidney stones, I would be looking at hydration status. I would be looking at actually a little bit of citrus, because citrus, if you could, does help to decrease the risk of kidney stones. And of course, depending on what type of kidney stones they are, would also help any nutrition practitioner working with you to know what types of foods that you should emphasize and what types of foods you should back off on.
Okay, thank you. And next question we have, I have leaky gut issues. I'm watching my diet and have the probiotic from NativePath order, but not receiving it for another 5 days. I'm taking a probiotic that my doctor recommended in the meantime, but I still have bowel leakage. This just started a month ago. Anything else I can do? So, I mean, that to me is just like, first look at the food, like look at what foods you're eating, make sure you're get rid of all those foods you should avoid, the processed and refined foods, the gut irritating foods. Like really, if someone's having that type of issue, avoid all grains, all dairy can be problematic, and really stick to whole food, proteins, vegetables, good fats. The test can point you in the right direction, as well as the reset guide. So definitely check that out. Email cs@support or cs@nativepath.com and ask for the Native Body Reset. And of course, we have the link in here for you where you can take the next steps with the test. Melody says, I ordered the test so it can help me guide. Well, I ordered the test. Can it help me guide through? Can it help me improve my autoimmune disorder? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question because of the way methylation impacts the genes that actually prevent the immune system from overreacting. That, and because methylation is important for even the manufacture of our immune cells. So yes, it certainly could be a help. We want to make sure that you're doing the right thing with methylation, and that can certainly address the autoimmunity.
Yeah, it's a totally different way of approaching autoimmunity, which I think is so important and effective. Linda says, I'm bipolar and have PTSD, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's disease. type 1 diabetes, obesity, started silver sneakers, exercise class, have been on NativePath for 6 months, take all the supplements, I'm doing better, but weight is really slow to come off. And I've lost 10 pounds in 6 months. What am I doing wrong? I eat grass-fed beef, organic eggs, nut milk. What grains can I eat? Any insights there, Amy?
Well, just like we like for people to not do a whole heck of a lot of grains, but the grain-like type of substances like quinoa and amaranth, they're really not grains, they're seeds. I would try those. I would try to be gluten-free. Gluten, itself has to do, there's a lot of information out there how the consumption of gluten can also activate the immune system and certain autoimmune conditions, which of course type 1 diabetes is. So I would suggest that. And like Chad said earlier, a good balance of when you're eating carbohydrate, hopefully it's a preferred type of carbohydrate a little bit, like, a little fruit, and with protein and fat, because that is what's going to stabilize the blood glucose. Thyroid, Hashimoto's you mentioned, I believe you mentioned Hashimoto's. Hope I'm not getting the questions mixed up, but yeah, for sure, gluten-free. But again, those, if you're looking for a grain type of food, I would do quinoa, amaranth, buckwheat, because they're not grains.
Yeah, Lynn, it sounds like
just a little bit of it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing a lot of good things with the protein, which is good. So just again, make sure that all the other factors are in play. Like sleep is a big thing that a lot of people don't pay attention to, but it's huge. Making sure you're getting hydrated properly. But the test can really point in the right direction and make sure you're eating the right foods. Amy, I know you probably got to go here pretty soon. Maybe we'll do a few more questions.
Sure.
And again, if we don't get all the questions, we'll try to answer them later on. I'll try to email everybody, get everybody taken care of. Let's see if we can get some more questions related to the test. So I believe I have a lot of inflammation. And would this test indicate that and advise me on what to eat or not to eat to cure this inflammation?
It's a start.
It's a start, yeah. I was going to say that. And when it comes to inflammation, the word cure is a weird word. Can it just all go away? And there's a lot of things that play into inflammation, right? There's a lot of things like the fats, the foods, our movement throughout the day. Our sleep is a big one. Our stress is a huge one. All those things play a part in inflammation. So you want to look at all the inflammatory factors that can put more logs in the fire and remove those things and chill your body out. But the test can help you do that, as can these good nutrition and lifestyle factors.
Right, and what you mentioned before with staying away from the trans fat, the mercury in the fish, the refined grains, sugar, absolutely any of those are going to be pro-inflammatory anyway. And then beyond that, if you're still struggling, I mean, we're big encouragers of identifying what your food sensitivities are, whether it's from elimination, because you could even be sensitive to something that is considered very health promoting.
Mm-hmm. And so let's see here. We got another question here. Dealing with poor sleep and gut issues, will this test help me and know why I can't fix these? That's a good question. Absolutely.
Yes, it can only help. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sherry, going back to the variants, right? Like you could have some variants that are contributing, especially to the gut issues, right? That are preventing you from having the proper enzymes, so you get the raw materials. So it can definitely help you and point you in the right direction, for sure. And of
course, the COMT variant, if that's there, well, any of these can impact our sleep, right? So any of the variants. So yes, I do definitely think it would help.
And Kate says, can you tell me where I might find a nutritionist to evaluate the supplements and medicines I am prescribed? That's a good question for Amy on these calls. If Kate is open to it and sharing information, would you be able to, or anybody from your team be able to look at and evaluate some of the supplements and medications she's taking?
Any review of test results, because we don't know anything really about the patient other than these 5 genes, if this is the only test that we're evaluating and reviewing, we're not permitted to give any kind of clinical guidance and say, here, discontinue this, take that, this is what I want you to eat. Just going to be general. But yeah, absolutely. We are available for individual consultations, and it's exactly what Epigenetics does. So I'd rather that be done in an individual type of appointment.
Okay, so we'll do one last question here. And again, Krista usually gives me all these questions later, and I do my best to answer them. So we'll get to them. But I know Amy has to probably go see some patients today. So last question from Brenda here. What is the biggest benefit of doing this test for a person's overall health? That's from Brenda.
The biggest benefit is because what you're doing is you're assessing your genetic makeup in 5 of the very, very key genes, and one of the most, if not the most important biochemical pathway that is happening in your cells. Because this biochemical pathway, this methylation, is not only impacting all those different organ systems we talked about, brain health and histamine and hormone balance and your way of detoxification, but it goes on to impact the expression of all your other genes. So yeah, from that standpoint, this is the starting point, especially if you haven't had any genetic testing done.
All right. Well, I think we'll shut down the questions there. And again, Krista will send me the questions and I'll give you answers as soon as I can. Just want to say thank you all for attending. Really appreciate all your questions, all just being a part of this in the community. Amy, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh my gosh,
sharing.
it was fun. Thank you. I loved being here with everybody and wonderful questions.
Thank you. Yeah. And
NativePath is awesome.
I like hearing that. So again, everybody who fills out the test, if you choose to move forward with the test, I highly recommend it. Fill out the information, results will come back, and then we'll continue this discussion around your genetic health with these weekly calls 2 times a week, where you'll have the opportunity to go even deeper into your genetic tests and the results and actions you can take, what foods to eat, what supplements to take, and move you in the right direction down the path. So with that, thank you everyone so much for joining. Amy, I'm going to shut down here. Thank you so much for being a part of it again.
Thank you very much for asking me. Take care, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.